but for the sake of time, let's get started with prayer. Let's pray together. Eternal God, we are relational beings made in your image. You have placed us in families that take so many forms. Sometimes these families nurture us. Sometimes they cause us pain. Sometimes they do both at the same time. Help us to live into this challenge with integrity and love. Help us to grow with one another towards you. Amen. All right, so just a little, has everybody been to all of the other ones? Yes, okay, so week 1, you talked about identity and pride. Week 2, risk and coming out. And then Jenny, last week, you guys talked about touch and naga. So this week, just a little bit of recap before we get into this week. So as we're looking, reflecting, and kind of moving forward, wanted to make sure we had in our thoughts this notion of self and other, as well as the Hebrew term that I think you talked a lot about last week in Naga. But self and other. So the author tells us the most challenging aspects of human existence is perceiving and negotiating a healthy relationship between self and other. And if we navigate that well, we build each other up. And if we navigate that poorly, we damage ourselves and one another. So one of our reflection questions here will be about self and other, even though it's different chapter or different pages than we read for this week. Well, that's one of the things that we'll talk about or have the choice to talk about. Hi, welcome. Your first name?
I'm Robbie.
Robbie?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Robbie.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Jill. And then Naga, this potent, life-altering touch of God. And two of the examples that the author gave was the story of Jacob and Esau, and Jacob wrestling with the angel and the damage to Jacob's hip, and then Esau's forgiveness. So this kind of damage and healing happening. And then Isaiah's lips being touched with the coal by the angel. That was another story as well. So God's exquisite touch, which wounds and heals, destroys and saves. So as we think about our relationships between self and other, also think about that touch, that wounding and healing touch of God, that destroying and saving touch of God. In my experience, I don't know how much of you know the congregation I came from most previously, Grace United Church of Christ, was what the UCC call an open and affirming congregation. And so open and affirming essentially means that they're welcoming everyone in the LGBTQ community into the full life, leadership, everything of the church. So a dozen or so, maybe up to 15 now, years ago, they decided to, they approved becoming open and affirming. And a lot happened in the years since. A lot of people left, a lot of people came. There was kind of this notion of wounding and healing. You know, when there was an upheaval, which in our own our own denomination, we've had a lot of that as well in some of the denominational decisions that were made, some around the LGBTQ community, actually a lot of them when it came to ordination standards and marriage standards. The whole denomination, there was upheaval, there was a lot of wounding, but there was a lot of healing too. And the place that I came from became a home for LGBTQ folks. It became family to those who, as we prayed, had families of their own that were not loving and accepting and healing and caring. So they needed, and the author in these chapters we're dealing with talks about the need for one another. We need one another even to know who we are. and to love one another as well. So it became this adopted family. But there was this notion of wounding and healing with God's nagah. So we're going to talk today a little bit about adoption, which was chapter 6, and authenticity. Okay, so we're going to do a quick little video clip. And as you're watching this and listening to the author, consider what strikes you in what she's saying, and why do you think it's striking you?
Halloween is here at Oriental Trading. Get free shipping now on over 10,000 favorites.
My parents were not gay. Don't get me wrong, they had many fine qualities. But this gay girl had to find other role models to help me understand this part of my identity. For lots of us, queer community becomes an adopted family. We choose one another and we need one another fiercely. We need one another to find love and also to understand the demands that this identity places on us. One lesson we learn early on is that we don't get to pick and choose who else is in this family. Christian community is supposed to be like that. Christianity intentionally ruptures the categories that people are born into. We're not defined by race or nationality or tribe or social status. Paul says that we are adopted by God. We are heirs, Paul says, but our inheritance is not a piece of property. That's sometimes how Christians treat both our churches and our theology, like property that we own so we can call all the shots. Don't get me wrong. It's a wonderful thing when people give generously to help build glorious worship spaces. It's a wonderful thing when insightful Christian leaders provide prayerful guidance about who we are and what we are called to be and to do. But the community that worships Jesus is not anyone's property. It's not an exclusive club. Queer people understand that adoption is a gift, not an entitlement. Our job as adopted children is simply to receive the gift, to choose back the one who has adopted us, and to invite others to enter the family that we are blessed to have found. Amen.
What strikes you most about what she said? And why?
I thought it was powerful that she said it's not an exclusive club. It's not entitlement. Everybody's welcome.
I like the part where she talks about that they become their own family and their own community because that's where the love has come for them. So I've heard people say family of choice rather than family of origin. And she wasn't obviously saying anything bad about her family of origin, but that she needed to be connected with people like her.
Yes, I've always had the sense that even when you grow up in a family that you feel is normal, whatever that means, you still have a family of choice.
Yes.
And especially in an era where families live distant from each other.
Yes.
Which I don't know whether that's changed much. But, you know, I think you always make families of choice. The reasons why are different.
I think it boils down to we need each other, right? We need, I think of my oldest son and his wife. We just went out to Ohio to visit them, right, for my granddaughter's first birthday. And they're out there without family. And that's hard, especially when you're raising a little one, but it's hard to be far away from family. So you kind of need that. It takes a village, right? It really does, and you need to kind of create your village, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
But folks of, whether it's folks like them that need other people to help them do all of the parenting things and the young adult things, or if it's folks in the LGBTQ community who just need other people that get it. Yes.
It's interesting, I think. I grew up in the Midwest and my grandparents lived in Ohio and in Massachusetts. And I grew up in suburban Chicago in southern Iowa. And my parents didn't live close to their parents, but my mother was a stay-at-home mom. And then when I was married to my daughter's dad, which was until she was 9, we lived here, my parents lived in Florida, and his parents lived in Minnesota. So there was no village. And I lived 45 minutes from my daughter and son-in-law. And every time they ask me to do something for them, I'm thrilled that I live close enough to do that. And that we get along, so they're willing to ask me. Because I think you could live close and still have no relationship.
When my son came out, he was a teenager, and I'm a straight parent. But he definitely needed other people that knew what he was going through, because I can only do so much as his mother, love him. But he had to have other people in his life, and he had to figure out who he was. So yeah. And the family, I think, can be that kind of, like there might be people in your family that don't agree with, what you're doing with your family, or, things like that. And so we had to say, if they, aren't comfortable around us, like our family or our friends, then, that's okay. You can leave and you can go your way.
Yeah, that's a tough, and I think that's a tough decision that folks in the LGBTQ community have to make. I think they have to come to this place, this sense of naga, right? This sense of wounding. So I need to separate from my own well-being. I need to separate from the family or friends or whatever that I grew up with and that I love, to be able to have health and wholeness going forward. It's a tough decision.
We made it through.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's healing and wholeness at the end of that, but it is a tough thing that sadly often has to happen. Anybody online there? Feel free to chime in.
It's a little bit difficult to hear the people who are speaking in Spelman Jr.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if anybody said this already, but for me, what struck me was at the very beginning, that a parent can't be everything that their child needs when they're coming out and in their new life. I don't know, that's an unrealistic expectation of myself, but it makes me very sad that I can't. There are things I can do, but things that other people need to do for them.
Yeah, Colleen expressed that very thing here. Yeah, thank you, Sharon.
I think that's interesting, because I think when something so different than what you expect happens, and you're the loving parent, I think you want to be able to step into the breach and fix it all. But if you step back, you can't be everything, ever. And so I think, don't be hard on yourself. I mean, it's easy for me to say, don't be hard on yourself. But I think, I remember when my daughter was, and I'm the bisexual person in our family. It's not my daughter. And I remember a time when she was, I think, a sophomore in high school. And it was the Monday after the homecoming dance. And a young man who sat next to her in German had committed suicide the night of the homecoming dance.
Oh, no.
And when she got, and of course they didn't know because the dance happened, he wasn't there, but you know,
Yeah.
kids go by themselves and it wasn't remarkable until they got there. And she had taken a treat for the Friday, the German teacher had something where they had, you know, Friday snack or something. And I had made something that she had taken to school that Friday and she came home hysterical that he said this was so nice of me. And you know, that's the last thing he said to her. And by Monday he's dead. And I belonged to First Presbyterian at the time. And Phoebe Kitson Davis was on the pastoral staff then. And I called Phoebe and I said, I need you to do a reality check with Amelia. She's telling me she's all right. She's not acting weird, but this is huge, I think. So Phoebe called her and took her shopping at the mall. Because where do kids talk? They don't talk in some pastor's office. They talk at the mall or in the car. So I think it's also, that was one of those things where, you know, you want to be at all, but there's no way I thought I could. And that one was so huge because, you know, how many times does your kid come home from school and say, this guy committed suicide? I'm like, oh crap. And this was probably 1996 or 7. So this is way before suicide was something we all talked about much more openly. But I think, and I hate to use the word anointing after the ritual this morning, but I think letting yourself anoint other people to be part of the village, I think is huge. And Phoebe wound up taking her and they did the mall for a few hours and she said, she's fine. But the burden was, and I know Amelia respected her, so the idea of going shopping with Phoebe was like amazing.
Yeah.
I'll forever be grateful for that. And isn't it a miracle when you get to know the people who are influencing your kid,
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
peripheral across it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I understand your point, Sharon. I think you want to be able to be everything.
But you're absolutely right. I want to be everything to my boys as well, but it can't be. And so it's so important, this notion of village or other mature adults in their lives is so important. Even just proximity, like even if I wanted to be everything, I'm not near my boys, either one of them now. And so
Yes.
yeah, we talked about
You
that.
just told me that.
Yeah,
They all
so
went very far
they
away.
went far away from me. So they need other people in their lives.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can help influence that, and sometimes I can't.
Yeah.
Just hope
You know,
that
I was
they-
just listening. I'm sorry. I
No,
know.
go ahead.
So as I was listening to you talk, I thought, I guess it means what everything means. Is everything sharing or is everything, I keep it all?
Mhm.
So maybe it's how we interpret how you are everything. But anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I think also as parents, we have to remember that just like God's watching over us, he's watching over our kids.
Yes, thank God.
And, you know, I've been doing a lot lately, serenity prayer, you know, and just letting go and letting God, letting go and letting God. It's really hard to do
Yeah.
with your children and with stuff in your life. But that's what's been working for me lately, is just knowing that I can't control it and God's looking over them. If I know that God's looking over the people I love, it'll be all right.
Oh, I'm gonna just
In
make
God's way,
cry.
God's way. Not necessarily the way I expect it to be, but
Yeah.
Well, and I totally agree with that. And my kids are much older probably than yours, but I've gotten so much better at that because the other thing I've discovered is I learned the most from mistakes I made in my life. So I need to also let my adult children make mistakes and have their journey, not me protecting them from that journey. And that's not easy. I'm not saying that glibly. That's very hard. But that's when they're gonna learn the most, because that's when I learned the
Yeah,
most.
it is.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing. I think it is for a parent is to let them fall.
Let them fall, and they need to.
Yeah, that's hard.
And I was gonna say, I think what you're talking about is all absolutely correct and excellent. The only thing you need to remember is to remain accessible.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Remain accessible so that if they have the option to come to you.
Oh, Jody.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Hi, Jody.
Good morning. I just wanted to say about, we're talking about your kids and children, but as we're also talking about the Christian community, when we're talking about people coming into our community that are gay and identify as gay, or any of the LGBTQ plus, I don't want to say we're like Andrea and I, but what people look for is that sense of family and support from the community is like family, not being so, we're the other, we're out here, but being made a part of the community in ways of being drawn into family type of events that is not just coming to church, sitting in the pew, listening to the message, going home. You have to be a part of your community to really be a part of the family. And that's the burden on every new person who comes into the Christian community, especially one of our size. You come in and you try and find your niche. But as an LGBTQ plus person, you're also in ways expect to have to identify yourself as being a part of that other community. That makes it more difficult. You have to find your community within the community.
Right.
That's just my take on being a part of it.
So so you self and other both have to do the hard work, right? However you
Yes.
identify yourself and however you identify the other. We both have to do the whole hard work, right? It's not just coming into the exclusive club, like she said, right? It's being willing to have the tough conversations. It's being willing to include others in this part of myself.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think what the Inclusivity Task Force is doing by providing these different identifiers that make, I'll just use the word, make the straight community have to identify or enable them to be identified by something other than maybe the initial conversation. Something about being that person being willing to step out and say, I want to be a part of that, because you have a huge congregation. Not everybody's going to put a sticker on. Not everybody's going to wear a little. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
So it's both ways. You want to be identified as being, inclusive, and I want to identify as as my community. But I also don't want to stand out. Like I've said for years, I don't want to be the token person,
Right.
you know, yeah, those are just some of my random thoughts this morning.
Yeah. Well, and I wish I could put my finger on exactly how they did this specifically, but when I went to Grace, that's the previous congregation, for those that have recently chimed in, my most recent congregation that I served was a LGBTQ community. And I went in, and my son Jake would often go with me. We were, as straight cisgender folks, we were the minority. And I look like probably the very person or people that ostracized a lot of these folks in their own lives, right? And so, you know, here I am, I'm in ministry, I'm a 50-something white woman, and, you know, have professed Christianity as my faith for years. And so I probably look just like the people that shoved them away. Yet they welcomed me and my son with open arms, no strings attached, fully part of this community, and welcomed me into their lives, you know, and the families they've created, their adoptive families, and they welcomed me. And I often think, do we do the same? I hope that I do, but it makes me examine everything that I do, everything that I say, how I behave, because I want that same thing for them that I was given when I entered into their community. So I hope we can all think in those ways. You know, if I were to walk into a church of LGBTQ folks, would I be wrapped with loving arms? And do we do that here? Do I do that myself? Yeah. Yes, just something I chew on a lot.
I know I said this last week, but I think it speaks to your comment, which is when the Presbyterian Church was going through the conversations about Amendment B, people in the LGBTQ plus community knew who the allies and the enemies were, because they had drawn lines in the sand. And significantly prior to 2014, there was class. I don't remember what it wasn't called Journey, it was called something else. Academy, that's right. There was a class exploring, I don't know, I don't even remember what the title of it was. But I attended that, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible, because it was dominated by we can never let the queers take over the Presbyterian Church.
Oh, golly.
It was fascinating.
Wow.
I mean, and I say fascinating because, in my opinion, and this is my experience, I'm only speaking for myself, didn't surprise me, disappointed me, but it surprised me. And that was the period in my life when people said to me, I don't know how you can still be a Presbyterian. And I would say to them, some people of faith need to be the quiet voice of stability. And, you know, as people find out who you are and who you sleep with and what you do and what your journey was, some of them will go, really, you? Yeah, pretty much. So I think if that had been my only experience as a person of faith, as a Christian woman, I would have run away screaming. Yeah. But I think that's today, to answer your question, if somebody who was really struggling said to me, is your church a place I'd feel safe? I would say yes. The church as a professed culture is safe. I'm not going to tell you that everybody within the culture is at the same stage of engagement and understanding, but I think it's safe. But it wasn't. It absolutely was. But, you know, I think that's part of the journey as a congregation that the denomination's been in. And not every church made the same decisions, obviously.
Right.
Anyway, that class was fascinating, not in a good way.
Not in a good way.
But I guess actually in a good way. It's kind of like the president before Biden. At least you know where everybody is now. I'm serious. I'm smart enough to know those values didn't go away, but they were underground. Now I know where they are.
Right, right.
I could not agree more.
They've come into the light. They've come into the light if you're in first service.
Oh, right, right.
So thanks for staying.
It takes a lot to get rid. It takes a lot to get rid.
Well, I just had that conversation with you about like, if I had grown up in the church and I were an LGBTQ person, you know, some of the folks that I met at Grace, I can't believe that they're still Christians, that they're still followers because of their stories of what they've been through. And I think, would my faith have been that strong? Or would I have run screaming from this notion of God that you're showing me? Now I know, and I still know that, you know, often daily I'll say, I'm not a follower of Christians, I'm a follower of Christ. I'm going to follow Christ. I'm not going to follow the Christians, I'm going to follow Christ. Like that's something that goes through my head every day. But if you didn't have that strength that folks like yourself have, or some of these folks have, would you stick with it? I just don't know that I would have.
I think it depends on how open you are to listening to Christ in your life.
Yeah.
Not religion.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in a family that wasn't particularly church attenders. They got us baptized and confirmed. That, I mean, check the box.
Yeah, check the box.
But
Yes.
I remember, what's it called? Youth for Christ.
Mm.
Is that the name?
Mhm.
One of my bandmates in high school was very active in Youth for Christ. And she invited me to some kind of tent meeting. And it was certainly not, I mean, I grew up in the Presbyterian church. That's where my parents had me baptized and confirmed. But I remember going to that. I have no idea who spoke or what the message was. But I remember being in the car with her and her pastor on the way home. And it was as if Christ had me in his arms. I remember that when people come to my door and say, are you born again? Absolutely. And I know when it happened and how old and how where I was, and they're like, oh, you gotta be a whack job. Had that experience not happened to me, I don't know how I would, but you know, it is, I think I always pray for being open to the voice of God in my life. If I were home on Zoom, I'd put myself on mute because I'm talking too much and other people should.
So we appreciate you sharing. Let's look at the next part of what the study guide would have us do. You have a handout, and for those of you online, these are, let me go forward here just a minute. We're going to go back and look at these 3 options, but these are the questions that we'll consider after we're going to break into 3 groups, and I'll put you all online there. I'll put you in one breakout group, and then we'll split into 2 here. So you're each going to take, well, we have options. There are 3 options, so we could each take a different quote that she gives us, and then kind of chew on that as small groups. You also have an option of if there's something in the book that your small group would like to talk about and chew on together that we don't have here, please do that. Like, we may or may not be happy with all 3 of the options given. So if you're not and you have something that you're really drawn to, please please chew on that and talk about that. But here's the questions, and then I'll give you the 3 options. And you have these on your page if you're here in person. So why were you drawn to this? What do you understand by it? What do you think it means? What do you learn from it? How does it articulate something new or different for you? Does it challenge you, and how? How would you like to challenge it? And if the author were here, what would you ask her about it? And so think on those questions. And then I'm gonna, for you on the handout, it follows right after those questions. For on the screen here, I'm gonna back it up. So this one, if you see, was pages 22 and 23. So this actually goes back to maybe the first time you met. And it talks about self and other. So take a minute. I don't think I need to read to you. I think you're capable of reading, but read that first one. See if any of you like that. Those of you online, that's the second one, second option. And the third one is this, trying to watch your eyes online to see if you're still reading. The first one kind of goes back and reviews self and other a little bit. The second one is in the midst of the adoption chapter. And then the last one is in the authenticity chapter. Okay. I'm going to move one of you over here. Over there, sure, thank you. So those of you that are online, do you have, speak up if you have a preference. I'll give you first dibs. Or remember, the other option is to, if there's something else in the book that you're drawn to.
I like 2 or 3 or a hybrid of them.
Okay.
That's good. That's good, Sharon. We'll go with
Okay.
that.
Okay. All right. So let's do, so they've got 2 or 3 or a hybrid thereof. So why don't you both decide? And if we all end up talking about the same thing, that's fine. Like there's no rules or regulations or open conversation is good. So
Can
I'm
you
gonna put,
2 back up online?
yep, I sure can.
You mentioned, oh, yeah, the pages.
Yes, so if you have your book, because once I put you into the breakout group, I think this screen will disappear for you. So you might want to pull up your book to pages 95 and 96, and then the third one is 145. Yeah, 145 is the other one. And let's look at our time versus, yikes, okay. So let's give you guys maybe.
An hour and a half.
No, we're not. I'm looking at the time, like it says 30 minutes, but we've got like 15 left
5
in the
minutes?
class.
5 minutes?
5, is that enough? How about 8?
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good.
I'll look at 8, so we'll give you about 8 minutes. All right,
No, that's not right.
all right, here we go. More breakout rooms, 1. All right, here you go.
Can we talk about how all 3 of these are interconnected?
Okay, open rooms.
So the second one, I guess,
So I'll say a suggestion, and I'll start by saying that the thing that made me select.
yes, and if you refer that back to number 1, where we talked about self and other.
Christianity
That's
worships God who disrupts any glib or easy notion of what self and other are, constantly challenging us to hit a reset button. In our efforts to comprehend how we're supposed to.
I love all this
live ourselves.
third one about every community having its nice.
Yes.
Just grab your lumps and work together, so that has a sense of dignity in it too.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
the community needs to work together to get through this stuff.
Yeah,
Trying to figure out. what
and that fits with what you said
You
earlier.
know how I said we all tend to think about ourselves, you know, little kids, they all think that.
God, that touch older
Can you think more and more widely?
Yeah, but you know, but
As adults, mature, emotionally intelligent,
that creates messes.
to look at things through our own lens.
Gift in it if
Yeah.
we're willing
To meet people, or they're open, I meet people that are different.
Yeah.
You see that,
Well, and so I have a young family, I have 2 girls.
depending on how challenging the situation.
My 13-year-old was excited to be member of the confirmance.
Myself,
So, you know, I'm trying to relate this to community, to self, to other.
and that's
She's at a point
joy.
in her life where she is not ready to do that. So I have to be okay with that, because I'm like, what? You know? So, you know, as myself, I'm struggling with that. My husband and I both are struggling with that, so.
And I think that's what God's asked
We
us
have
to do.
to somehow help her find her way, you know, now, because now that she's older, of course, when she was a child, she came here all the time.
Yes.
She was a baby. She grew up in this church, she went to preschool.
It's interesting.
Of course she did.
She did all the youth choirs, everything, so now she's coming to an age where I'm having to learn that she is now becoming an
Make me
independent
think.
person, and I'm hoping she finds her way. So
And how do
it's
you-
interesting to think about it in that context.
How do you stay open without feeling out of control?
Right.
How do you stay open without feeling out of control? So this challenging us to hit a reset button, every time you hit the reset button, you're pushed out of your comfort.
But how is she
I
gonna?
think it's like
So I can't tell her, you know, this is the way it's gonna be.
And equity. And it's not.
I think you can do
everything. I think that's what's gotten people.
your.
It kind of, it's like there's
Yes.
this knee-jerk reaction to, I can't think or do anything about anything. They're telling me I can't do what this cancel culture conversation that's going on. Nobody's trying to cancel anything. They're just trying to tell the truth.
Yes.
We're raised with is fraud, but none of us want to do that.
Do it.
And I think that's the reset button. That's what I thought about when I read reset button.
I'm not gonna do it.
How do you hit the reset button as an individual? How do you hit the
I
reset
just always assume I'm just. But.
And how are they entwined?
Because there's like this nice adult.
Because I don't think a congregation can do it
Have control over.
unless individuals within it are willing to.
So, you know, when we give that permission. Not that we're gonna stop being part of the church, but, you know, just.
I'm not sure it's the reset button for.
Well, I think this congregation hit a reset button.
Yes, right. I mean, we can't force her, but we can't bring her.
This congregation hit a reset button when it was willing to.
But staying in community, and that's where the cure. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But she's probably not the only.
I mean, it hit a reset.
Yes,
button.
Well, no, and
that way.
And
Our
of
camp.
course, this is all happening at an age.
And I'm sure
when
there
there
are who would have said.
That's
Yes.
a normal
Yes.
developmental stage.
Yeah.
to rebel against
I'm not gonna do church.
Yeah.
Church is doing drugs.
Some level, you want them to be able to do that. and then
Certainly
certainly.
being honest.
Exactly. They make the decision
That was real.
we would like them to make, but
Exactly.
they're on their journey and.
Is there some
They
kind of
get
connection
there.
to authenticity with that? Reverend Elizabeth, Pastor Elizabeth talks about?
You know, it's like, let's just
Yeah.
deal with it. And cut through it.
Yeah, I know some of my parents are like, well, I just want to make this, need to make this. Time it used to want.
You still need to
Some
guide.
options,
Yeah.
you know, if they don't know anything about the
Yeah.
community.
Um, my uncle was gay. No, he was.
And model it.
Yeah,
Modeling
say
it.
this is,
You know, this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
yes,
This is what it does
this
for
is
me.
what our ethic and our value at home.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of, you know, crap out now.
Yeah.
I was a child, I was confirmed, I was in love. It was later, but I was raised in the post church, just been
Nurturing.
tenth grade in my church, right?
He was
Ours was eight.
willing to talk to me. Unlike my parents, who would talk to me, always say that there are things. that It was just, he was my uncle, I don't think in Chicago, and he didn't, you know, he can't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wait, you have until.
I just loved him.
They're
He was a
compliments of
great guy.
Is that common?
Well, and so my whole feeling about.
Yes, you
Yes,
don't remember church, you know.
That's okay. And my daughter was bad, you know, it was my whole life has been involved with. baptized,
They were all adults.
Yeah. And they've been involved with my children and, you know, my grandchildren. And who just love them.
Probably it's for sure. It's all the college students I've taught, we've taught.
That's, it's hard for me because I don't have.
I did.
Some periods.
I did in college.
And then they'll come back, you know.
You know.
But I think you do, and you're pretty fair.
But you're giving them a
It's God.
foundation.
Yes,
You
yeah.
have been.
Foundation.
Right,
It's
they
God.
said, come here, it's really.
You don't have the label
I
pretty
think it's the
much.
foundation of you, I just love the worship this morning.
Yeah, I
You're a
do too.
child of God.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
You are a child of God, you matter. And, yeah, that was beautiful. I agree. So could we sing that hymn more often?
Robbie is fun.
But the first time. Tim brought it.
I mean, I've known it, but
I don't recall.
it. I don't know, it's cool to be gay.
It wasn't,
Then,
it wasn't.
but the message I thought fit very much with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
You you're ever the church. Wasn't safe.
It's like, I don't feel like the church is where gays. Yes, it has.
And it
Many,
continues
many
to.
churches.
Well, I mean, that's part of the rupture.
Not that it's
What's so interesting about the rupture, we have all these good things happening, but there's arrested.
Right,
It was
yeah.
not okay.
You were a kid.
Yeah, and I mean, but
You didn't have that judgment.
But he also, yeah, I didn't have the judgment, but also he lived with Uncle Paul. He lived as long with Uncle Paul as my parents were married. You know, which back in the day, they could not get married.
You know, at time of it, so I didn't blame God for
And loved each other very much, and they were great. And it was weird because I became his executor of his estate. And was in a good time in Arizona when he was dying, and I had to go down and handle all the affairs and yada yada. And I called it my house. That was a lot of responsibility on my part. But they very selected me out of everyone to do this, which I thought was really very cool. You know? So I'm not saying it's cool to come down to Sarah, it's more accepted, I think.
We talk about it.
It's a different scenario and people aren't freaked out.
So that brought you back.
You know,
Yeah, and
okay.
I didn't really miss the church, because we left being pastors, and my husband went back to seminary.
But people are fearful.
Oh, wow.
Other, again, which is where I was starting at, you know.
Yeah.
You know, when
Oh,
you
it's
say
their daughter, it's different.
cisgender,
Oh,
you know, white, you know, male, and even as white females. You know, I do certain, I went to college with guys, you know, a white male blends. A lot of times the way I evaluate the way I was raised. So when I see things that are different, it's jarring. That's asking me to.
So,
accept
yeah,
that.
it was good.
That's be present and not accepted. That's what loving our neighbors, those people, not loving people that, you know, one of the gospels talks about that. Not loving people that are like you, but loving people that are different. Right. Really hard to do. Enemies, and I think when it says enemies, I don't think it's people that are really enemies, it's just people that are not
Stuff with that.
8 minutes.
I can explain my silence for a minute. I have a hard time in breakout groups. And I can hear. And when she- There was
But you know that.
I need it.
And
sometimes
he, yeah, sometimes he
they don't have that much. I mean, here I have them on.
for another church. And I can't
No.
tolerate this anymore.
Yes, I
I'm going to church. And I
And friends, and I guess. On the rest of them, so I just say to them,
I myself. Church where it's.
Okay. Well, it's good.
Yeah.
We are coming back.
I'm not.
I don't know why this is.
We're back, and that was a very short 8 minutes.
That was, I'm sorry. There's so much we want to talk about, and that's exciting. Let me close this. There we go.
What is that? What's that? Oh, you know what? I got a screen right here.
I don't know why that's over there.
If we could text if that would make it go away.
It shouldn't, because that's not a touch.
I don't know what's going on.
All right.
Strange, I've never seen that.
Yeah, no, that never has come up on a screen for me.
Yeah, I don't, it was here. Now it's
Yeah.
there. You guys probably can't see it. They might.
Yeah.
I don't think you do.
They would see their.
You actually have a keyboard, those of you that are online, you have a keyboard blocking half of your, and I don't know how to get rid of it.
Oh,
As long as you can't see it and it's not blocking you.
no, we can't see it.
Okay, good. We'll just leave it. I don't know why it's over there. It was on the other screen. Now it's over with you. So just because we're short on time and won't have time to go through all of those questions, can each group give us a little recap maybe of kind of what you talked about, what you leaned into for your time together? And any group can go.
I'm willing to.
Okay, so this group. what
And
is-
so our group talked about, we actually talked about all three of the quotes.
Oh, wow. Shoo.
No, we're-
Speedy Gonzalez over here.
No, because
We're
you
just
did-
amazing.
Yeah, right. Because you did such a nice job of having us, read each one. So we felt pretty confident, that we knew each one. And we said, well, let's find a way to make all three of these kind of be connected.
Okay.
And we thought that they were connected through community. So like self and other, finding yourself, finding others in the community is kind of related to number one. Number two, we talked about LGBTQ community and, how we need to bring them and adopt them. And we need to be adopted by them as well. And then we talked about in that community, we need to be authentic. And that relates to number three. So that's, anybody else want to add anything? Yeah, so that's how we tried to connect the three.
Good for you.
Well, it comes down to community, in other words.
Yeah,
It really does.
that was the thread for us, for all three of those.
It's all about relationships, authentic relationships, isn't it? How about those of you online? Does anybody kind of want to recap what you folks leaned into online?
Go, Sharon.
Go, Sharon.
Thanks, Jody. We talked about how it's important to feel safe in a community, and that's very important to people from the LGBT QIA plus community. We talked about, we touched on so many things, and there just wasn't enough time. I'd love to have another couple of hours to talk with everybody, but Yeah, my mind is blanking right now. So Joni, help me out.
Well, I guess I was saying, Andrea and I are both in our 70s now, so it's looking back on the communities of our that she sort of talked about, the going to a bookstore or going, being a part of a community that's really organized. We have our friends from years ago, but the desire to be a part of the Christian community and feel safe when you walk into that environment and just be a part of the community and not necessarily be identified as, standing out in some way. The desire is just to be like everybody else in the community and feel safe when you walk into it.
Yes, and Joni, you also commented about how we are all called, each one of us is called to be a part of a particular community. And so that's why it's important to work through the messes, not just to throw up your hands and say, I'm leaving the community because I don't like it here, or, they're making decisions that I don't agree with.
Yeah. And I was, Robbie, I was talking about you staying in this community and being a beacon, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. How about this group over here? How did your conversations lean?
Okay, so we started on one. We just stayed with one because I was struck by that last sentence that starts, Christianity worships a God who disrupts any glib or easy notion of what self and other are, challenging us to hit a reset button. So we talked about how when we see people that are not like us, that dissonance makes us go in directions maybe we don't want to go, or maybe we find it delightful. People react in different ways depending where they're coming from. But those challenging situations cause us to hit the reset button, if I understand what Robbie was talking about. And that's a good thing because growth comes out of that. So anything else? A good summary, yeah. I mean, God challenges us to be Christ-like and love our neighbor. Our neighbor isn't somebody necessarily that looks like us or thinks like us or believes like us. But those challenges make us grow. That's what I love about the Tower of Babel. Everybody speaking in different languages or tongues, in Pentecost, everybody understanding one another. It's pretty cool.
So every time something that's other, someone that's other comes, we meet, it challenges what we think we know, what we think we believe. And so every time that happens, we have to reset what we think, what we believe, what our preconceived notions are, or whatever. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I would like to, maybe as a whole group, end with reading this and a little bit of discussion of what might be drawing you to this. And this time I actually will read it to us. You can see that online, yes? The excerpt for reflection and discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Authenticity in church requires courage. It is hard work to talk openly when you are afraid of losing something you value or need. It can be hard to trust, hard to be honest, hard to put yourself at risk of attack. You know all of this. But the fact that it is hard does not excuse churches from doing the work. In fact, church should be the place where we take most seriously the need to do this and to do it well. The challenge inherent in the relationship between self and other exists in every sphere of our lives. Church should be the place where we get to work it out. Church should be the place where our priesthood shows forth, where we make ourselves vulnerable as individuals, and as communities to invite both individuals and other kinds of communities to enter the sacred. I'm sorry. So as we look at, I think you all have, do I have down here? Yeah, I also have one here. What big issues are playing out right now where self and other issues are part of the conversation, maybe here at Westminster or in your own relationships or local communities, your neighborhood? Are you able to talk openly about those dynamics?
I think the political climate has proven to us that we can't always talk openly about that. And it pains me that so much of that divide is driven by people alleging to hear God telling them what they think is true. Because I'm personally convinced God is not telling them that. But, you know, that's a value judgment on my part. But I think I happen to be a Democrat. I hosted a garden party for the fellow running for the 156th Pennsylvania House. And the campaign gave me the voter information for everybody on my street to invite only the Democrats. And I'm like, what good does that do? So I wrote a separate invitation, garden party, very transparent. This was for Chris Pielli. And I put it in every single mailbox on my street. And only one non-Democrat came. And I thought that was fascinating.
Did you have a good discussion with that person? Was it positive?
It was neither negative nor positive. It's a relatively new person in the neighborhood. And I honestly don't know whether he's registered Republican by habit or by choice, but he came as much to meet people as he did to meet Chris. And ironically, Chris's wife had tested positive for COVID that day, so he had to dial in on my big screen TV. But you know, it was live. But I thought it was fascinating that no one came. And I didn't do it as a fundraiser. I did it as a meet the candidate.
Yeah.
But I think that's what was so disappointing to me. Not that I was shocked, but if somebody had invited me to a candidate to meet Heidi Vanderbilt, I would have gone. But nobody on my block who's a registered Republican or in my little neighborhood did one. But her signs are out. And I'm like, really? But we don't have civil discourse. And I think that's the thing that, you know, it's not Christian to be this way, in my opinion. So that's the reset button. We aren't hitting reset, we're hitting retrench.
So how can we be different? We in this room, we Westminster, how can we be different? How can we be open to that discourse? How can we be safe community and be clear that we're a safe community? Because if we're not very open about being a safe community, folks in the LGBTQ community won't darken our thresholds. Like if they don't know for sure this is a safe place, they're not going to try.
The risk is if we do that too loudly, the people who think that LGBTQ plus is an abomination won't cross our door.
Right. And that speaks
And that's the paradox. I don't know if you call that a paradox or a dilemma.
So essentially, what are we willing, there's the nagah, right? What are we willing to risk? What are we willing to have wounded?
But that's the paradox because, and by the way, I'm with Robbie 100%. But that's the paradox, because if we choose that as our commitment, then we have chosen to walk away from this other group, faction, whatever, people that believe passionately and believe they're good Christians. And are we pushing them away too? Is that what, I don't know the answer to that.
But haven't we already professed that we're open and safe? I mean, haven't we already, I don't know. I mean, people in the LGBTQ community can tell me how, they perceive that or not, but we openly marry gay individuals in our congregation.
We've got the stickers.
We have this.
So Jill, we were having a conversation this week and you shared a story which I think kind of speaks to that of one of the young people from that church where you were who now I think is at Westchester University and came through the church. And you want to share what you told me?
Sure.
Yeah.
So Alex, my friend Alex, is a trans person, and they are currently worshiping at Grace, went through Millersville, but they're in a position that they'll probably be moving. They do like school counseling, and I forget the program, but essentially it's one step further than the high school guidance counselor will do. And so it was grant funded, but now I think the school, what's the school here called? PALC? It's a charter school here in Westchester. PALCS, okay, it's PALCS. So mostly online, but what they do is they meet with college-bound students and help them discern the college that's right for them, the application process, the financial aid process, and really walk them through. So anyway, long story short, they're probably looking to move to this area. And so they wanted to come and visit Westminster because, I've talked to Westminster. So we walked through, they came and we walked through and tried to give the best information I could and all of the things that Westminster does. And I'm sure I didn't even catch a part of it. And they loved everything about it. Do you know what the one stickler was?
It was an accept. What?
The bathrooms.
Oh, yes.
They did
Good
not-
point. Good point. We need gender neutral
they
restrooms.
did not know where
That's-
to go to the bathroom.
That's really cool.
Huh.
That is something we have done at my university, Westchester University. I'm a professor there. So we have a community clinic that we serve people in the community. We serve a lot of trans individuals come through our clinic for various, communication voice needs. So that was a big push for me because I wanted to make sure they felt welcome in the bathroom. So now when you come into the department, there is no gender associated with the restrooms.
Right.
Yeah, so that was a big thing. Yeah, I
That's
hadn't thought of that here. Oh my gosh.
It's a big thing. Like, where do I go? There are, I think, relatively easy fixes with our
Yes.
I
bathrooms.
was just gonna say, that's an easy.
But now they were happened to be here. It was like 4:30 and there was almost nobody in the
Yeah.
building. Most of the staff had even gone. Barb was here. They met Barb. Who else did they meet? I think one other person they met. But, so it wasn't a big issue. But if they were here on a
Yeah.
Sunday morning full of people,
Yeah.
Yes.
where do I go that not only am I comfortable, but I wouldn't make someone else feel
Yeah.
terribly
Yeah.
uncomfortable? So where is that
Are we
space?
talking about that in the leadership of the church?
I don't know.
I have not heard it being talked about,
Say
but I
that
think,
again?
I
but
just
I
asked,
think we need to.
yes.
Say that again, I didn't hear the question.
I just asked, have we talked about that in the leadership of the church, dealing with gender neutral restrooms? Have we? Trustees have talked about it? Okay.
So that was,
That's the
know
only
that it-
thing
I was
holding
just-
this person up?
I'm not sure that it's an easy fix.
Yeah.
Maybe it's signage. But I don't know that we have space for, and by the way, in a restaurant, if, the woman is in there 10 minutes and the guy's in there too, I go into the guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but, and I would, I have done, you gotta go, you gotta go. And there's a woman's line like out the wazoo. So but put yourself in their place.
Yes, oh, I know, that's
Am
all.
I gonna just be bold and do that?
Yes, right. No,
Yeah.
probably not.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Right. And so
That's
life is
really
hard
good to
enough.
hear.
Like,
That was the only thing holding this person up.
yeah, that was kind of the, like, ooh,
Did they know about Queer Virtue, the class?
yeah, I talked to them about it. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, and the good thing, and I've said this before, but I'm really new, but I think that's wonderful that there was only one thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you said to them, or I certainly would have, well, look at that, you know,
Yeah.
that's a great issue. Yes,
Yeah.
that's something that we would be
Yeah.
open to figuring out what to do
Yeah.
with that.
Well, and they
that's
challenged me.
great.
They're like, so you're gonna ask about that, right?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
"You betcha."
Of course,
Gotcha.
yeah,
So,
It's on the radar.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
that's awesome.
yes. So anyway, that's, yeah, I guess that if I were to go back and, you know, how are those issues affecting your decision-making or your ministry? At the moment, that's one,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
That's one. But it was an important observation.
Yeah,
for them.
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that they were comfortable enough and open enough to say it.
Yeah.
Somebody could leave here and say, well, I'm not going there because
Right.
I don't need that.
Right,
But there's the self others community. There we go.
yeah, yeah.
It ties into what we're talking about.
Yeah. And, you know, Alex and I have a good enough bond that they were very open.
Yeah, that's great.
that was good. So, anything else for the good? I want to honor your time, and I think we're past time. Yes, it's 12 o'clock. Anything else for the good of the conversation, for the good of the group?
I need to just say, next week is the final week
Oh.
of Queer Virtue.
Okay.
Chris Clark will be leading it and because Rise Against Hunger will be taking place in this space, we have a new Zoom room in what was called the site. That, I don't know what the for, whatever
Yeah,
the
it's
room number.
right past the coffee.
It's where the middle school class and some other, but anyway,
The numbers.
go walk past the chapel and it'll be on the right and you want to go in.
Yeah, before, yeah.
Yeah, so you want to go there. If you're planning to be in person next week, go to the site. It will still be on Zoom because we have a new Zoom room in there.
Yeah.
And then
What are the chapters?
5 and 10.
5 and 10, the ones that are left, thanks.
Yes, Anne.
There's, unfortunately, in my Kindle, this version of it gives you locations. It doesn't give you page numbers. So I just borrowed
Halloween's.
book. The one thing that I thought was, the one paragraph that I thought was more powerful than any other in the whole book that I've read so far. Oh, here you go. So on page 141 in the middle, it says Christian community should be a place where one gets to work out the most vexing ethical challenges of our lives. The challenge to perceive and negotiate a healthy relationship between self and other. And, you know, I read that and I said, now I know why I go to church. That, you know, and why I keep coming back.
Yeah.
That was like, that was really profound for me.
That this should be the place where we can negotiate
Well,
that.
not only that,
Wrestle
the
with it.
fact that it's most, because this is why I go to all the journey classes. I'm involved in so many things in the church. It's a place where I can work out the most vexing ethical challenges in my life,
Mhm.
and a place where I can talk to people that will help me challenge and perceive and negotiate a healthy relationship between myself and other. I mean, that was like, wow.
It's all right there,
Wow.
in that class. Well, thank you. I'm going to close this in this prayer, but thank you all for being that place where we can do just that and challenge one another and wrestle and negotiate some of these tough, vexing things that we, between self and other, and sometimes even between self and self. Let's get real.
And please, if you haven't signed the sheet when you walked in, do that before.
Yeah, I think everybody did, I think. And we got y'all that are online. Let's close with this prayer. Gracious God, who created us as our authentic selves and adopted us into your love, remind us today and continue to remind us of the vital importance of healthy relationships between self and other, and the deep connectedness of those relationships to you, Lord. And remind us of the Nagah of the cross, your wounding and healing touch that brings to us a salvation for your kingdom that is for self and other. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all very much. Thanks all.